volunteered with us in the past and been a part of our program is my good friend from college, Kelsey Maylander. So, and I don't know if I should refer to you as Dr. Kelsey here, but it's proud to have you on, Kels, and excited that you can help shed some light on COVID vaccine and try and help ease some people's minds with a little bit of education. So, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Colin.
A little background on Kelsey. I'm just going to share her bio, and that Kelsey is joining us today as a board-certified infectious diseases pharmacist. She entered the world of infectious diseases 13 years ago when she worked as an HIV researcher and then went on to receive her doctorate of pharmacy in 2015 from the University of Colorado School of Pharmacy. She completed 2 years of postdoctoral work. Her PGY1 was completed at Kingsbrook Jewish Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York, and her PGY2 was completed at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. Dr. Maylander now works at Rose Medical Center, where she partners with an infectious disease physician to help optimize use of antimicrobial agents within the hospital. The past few months, Dr. Maylander has focused a significant amount of energy on educating hospital staff on the COVID-19 vaccines. Dr. Maylander is especially pleased to join the Arvada Chamber of Commerce today, since Arvada is where she grew up, recently moved back to, and ultimately calls her home. So Kels, let's just jump right in. We have some time here, and we'll try to, like Cami said, get to questions here throughout. But right now we have started off. So first question that we want to start with is really, can you explain, Kelsey, a bit about the COVID-19 vaccine and how it was developed? What was the process to create and test the effectiveness?
Yeah, so the COVID-19 vaccines followed the normal process that we follow to develop vaccines. And so what that really looks like is that you have your animal trials, phase 1 trials where you figure out the dose that you'll use, phase 2, and then phase 3 trials. And so kind of the big difference with the COVID-19 vaccines was that through Operation Warp Speed, there was a lot of financial investment into the biotech companies through this public-private partnership that really allowed them to run these phases concomitantly. And so your animal studies were done at the same time as your phase 1, your phase 2 and 3 were done at the same time. And then at the time that phase 2 was starting, they started to ramp up manufacturing. And so what this really did was allow the completion of all the necessary steps to be done much quicker than what we've seen in the past. And so I think this is a really critical piece, because that was probably the question I had in my mind of how have we brought these to market so quickly? Because normally vaccines take much longer. In terms of what they were studying, so the primary endpoint of the phase 3 trials, which is really what the trials that we are looking at to see the safety and efficacy of these vaccines, was looking at how the vaccination impacted your symptomatic disease. And the reason that they did this was just because it's the symptomatic disease that's really causing the problems. It's causing the significant impact on our health. It's causing our hospitals to be overwhelmed. It's causing a lot of people around the world to die. And then that's really what's affecting our economy, our ability to interact. And so being able to impact that symptomatic disease is really the most critical piece, at least initially. And so how they did that is that I'm really going to be focusing on the 2 vaccines that are currently on the market, and that's the Moderna vaccine and then the Pfizer vaccine. And so the way that they set up their trial, the phase 3 trials were event-driven. So that meant that they had pre-specified case numbers of COVID that they were looking at. And so once people got the 2-dose series of vaccination, they were followed. They'll be followed for 2 years. And then they follow them to see if they develop COVID. Once they reached that pre-specified number of cases, then they unblinded who got vaccine and who got placebo. And so that's really where we get that 94-95% efficacy, and it relates to what proportion of the people in the trials received vaccine that got COVID. So 95% of the people that received placebo the people that received placebo were 95% of the cases of COVID that developed in the trials. Does that make sense? It's a little bit complicated, a little sciencey, making sure I didn't lose anybody here. So
No, that at least I can follow. I hope everyone, everyone else can. So thanks for breaking that down. Yeah, and so when it comes to someone that might be concerned the process, we've heard, oh, it's rushed, right? Because it was faster than most vaccines, and we've heard that. What would kind of you say to them? Obviously, we went through the steps as far as kind of what was all done, but I guess what would you say to someone that feels like, well, it was so fast, it was so rushed, I don't know if it's safe.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that understanding kind of the impact of Operation Warp Speed, I think that is one piece of that puzzle. I think also another thing that I was actually surprised at as I was looking at the trial protocols for these vaccines, Moderna indicated that they had allotted 25 months for the phase 3 trial to get those pre-specified COVID cases to be able to really evaluate if it was effective. However, because our pandemic is so widespread and so significant, it took about 6 months. So I think that's a comment of kind of the emergency that we're in, but it also explains that shaved a year and a half off of the development process.
Wow.
I think also what's important is that when they were designing these trials, so the way that this works is that emergency use authorization is kind of where we're operating right now. And so before you can apply for emergency use authorization, you have to have at least 2 months of safety and efficacy data. And some of the rationale that went into that timeline is that in general, you would expect the vast majority of safety events associated with vaccines to occur within a 6-week timeframe. And so having at least that 2-month timeframe for safety data to be collected really should capture the majority of those safety events. And so, yes, I would say that we don't know the potential safety events that may happen a year down the line, 2 years down the line, but really we're expecting those safety events to happen within 6 weeks. And looking, again, kind of comparing this to the overall pandemic, I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind as we're looking at implementing these vaccines is what's the risk versus benefit. And so, again, with our pandemic, it's pretty significant, as I hope most people can recognize. And so I think that that's another piece to consider.
Okay, great, thank you. So, what are the difference really between the two vaccines on the market? We talk about, the two, and, are there any other vaccines that are in development currently?
Mm-hmm. So the two vaccines that we currently have on the market are Pfizer and Moderna. Both of these are mRNA vaccines. And so what that really means is that if you think back to your 10th grade biology class, you have DNA that is then transformed into RNA, which is then transformed into protein. And then that protein is really what is eliciting that immune response. And so that's kind of the basics of how those work. And so in terms of how they compare to each other, I really think of them as being very similar. The efficacy and safety are very similar. Logistically, there are some differences. So Pfizer has those ultra cold storage requirements. So implementation is a bit hard to accommodate. Moderna just requires that kind of normal freezing temperature. And then in terms of the dosage schedule, Pfizer requires a 3-week period between the first and second dose. Moderna requires 4 weeks. Other than that, they're pretty equal in my mind. In terms of other vaccines that are being developed, there are hundreds of vaccines being developed around the world. I just double checked last night and they said that there are currently 19 candidates that are being used in clinical trials in the United States. Of those 19, I would say there are kind of 2, maybe 3 that I'm keeping an eye on. The one that is probably furthest along in the development process is by Janssen. And then Another one that's a little bit further out is the Oxford AstraZeneca, which you can see has received approval in other parts of the world. As opposed to being the mRNA vaccines, they're viral vector. And so these vaccines have been used in previous vaccines that are currently on the market. And so looking at the Janssen, what I think is really interesting and really promising about this one is that it's a single dose. So looking at the logistics of implementing a 2-dose series for vaccinations, it is a lot harder. And so having an option where it's a single dose would be really helpful, especially for low resource areas, countries, that kind of thing. And so what we expect is that the phase 3 trial data should be out for Janssen in the coming weeks. So we should have a little bit more information. Again, they have to go through the emergency use application. And so it will be a little bit of time if they meet those safety and efficacy endpoints before those would be before those would be brought to the market.
And I'm just curious, so once those would be brought to the market, you then have one that's a single dose, one that's a double. I don't know if you know this or not, but would that be something that people would have somewhat of a choice? I know we want to get these out, right? And we want to get it out there, but I would see a lot of people being like, well, I want this one versus this one and trying to go for that. Do you have any, I know this is early on, it's not even out yet, but do you know how that might work?
The only thing that I can say is that in my experience from Pfizer and Moderna, we don't have much say of which ones we get in the hospital. And so the logistics of these are already very challenging. And so I would encourage people that if you have the opportunity to get a vaccine, that you take that opportunity and not to complicate an already complicated situation. That being said, if you have something that would make you contraindicated to receiving the mRNA vaccines and you cannot safely get them, then that's a different story. But if it's just a preference, I would say probably just take the one that you're offered at this point. But obviously that's a little bit speculative. And so we'll see as that comes to market.
Yeah, and where I'm coming from is more of that mindset, and I'm with you. When I can get mine, I will personally get it that, whatever they offer to me. But it's only, I think about the mindset of kind of our country and the world right now, and so many questions. And I know that will be one of the questions that people ask when that different side of things are offered. So that's why I put that out there for our viewers. So, can you share really why we need to get 2 doses of the current vaccine?
So really the first dose in my mind is what primes your immune system. And then that second dose is what I would really describe as providing the longer lasting immunity. And so when we look at these, one of the unanswered questions, which we have several because we're pretty early in both the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 pandemic and that new virus, but then also in vaccine development, we don't have all the answers. And so what it looks like is that 2-dose series is really what's going to provide that durable effect. And durability just refers to how long those vaccines are going to last. And so in December, Moderna published a paper that really compared the body's immune response 4 months post-vaccination to 1 month post-natural infection, and really trying to tease out how long are these going to last. And so at that point, the immune response for those that had received the vaccine was much more significant than that of 1 month post-natural infection. And so at least preliminarily, that durability data looks promising. Again, we follow these people for 2 years that are enrolled in the trials. And so it'll be interesting to see how long these vaccines last. At this point, I think Moderna came out and said that they expect their vaccines to last several years. But again, this is a question that we're actively studying right now. I'm hopeful that it's not going to be a yearly vaccine, but time will tell. And so, yes, going back to your original question, very important to get the second dose just so that you have that longer lasting immunity.
And you are, and the time frame in which, and I apologize if I missed this, but the time frame in which that you received those 2 doses, is it 3 weeks? Is that what I've seen? Is that correct?
3
The
weeks
give or
for
take?
Pfizer, 4 weeks for Moderna. They kind of have, that's the kind of black and white answer. Obviously things happen, and so they have guidance of if you're outside of those timeframes, then to get your vaccine as soon as possible outside of that time frame. They don't recommend restarting the clock or restarting the first dose after a specific amount of time, but really you should try to stick to those schedules if at all possible.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. So, we talked about the 2 doses. What, as far as side effects, we've all heard something out there, right, when the vaccine came out. Are there any side effects that really, from your professional opinion, that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so vaccines, I kind of group it into two different buckets. So the fancy scientific word for one of those is reactogenicity. And so what that
Know
really,
exactly what it means. Got it.
I know, right? What that really refers to is the body's immune response as it is ramping up and providing protection after receiving your vaccine. And so those are those influenza-like symptoms that you can get. And so those are not unexpected, unfortunately. And so when you get it, you may feel kind of crummy for a day or two. That's not from getting COVID. These vaccines are not live. They cannot give you COVID. And really, it's just your body's way of telling you, hey, I'm working, I'm giving you protection. Those symptoms that you see include fever, headache, muscle and joint pain, maybe some fatigue. And so generally those start within a day or two of vaccination and then last for a day or two, are self-limiting, don't require trips to urgent care, emergency room, that kind of thing. They're pretty mild. And so I like to tell people that so that they're prepared. I think that there's been a lot of work in being very transparent during this process, as there's been a lot of scrutiny and a lot of people are looking at this. And so those reactogenic symptoms are expected and really, in my mind, are not unsafe. They're just uncomfortable. The other bucket that I think of are those more significant safety reactions that we're looking at. And so these would be the ones that would dictate who it is safe to receive vaccine in. Really something that would require medical intervention or something like that. And so with the mRNA vaccines, we have seen cases of anaphylaxis. And so that's the one that I think most people are keeping a really close eye on. And so what I urge people to remember, however, is that although this is a very significant side effect, it's happening in about 11 cases per million vaccinations. So really the incidence of this is very low. It's something that they're keeping a really close eye on. And then I think as you consider the incidence of these serious side effects, it's really helpful to kind of put that into perspective and really realize that even though it's such a low incidence, it's really being looked at closely and scrutinized. And so again, kind of commenting on how we're really evaluating the safety profile and what we're doing to help ensure that people are remaining safe with vaccination. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Thank you. So, and we do have a question here that I wanted to ask from one of our attendees for you, Kels, and then we have a couple more questions after that. But a reminder, if anybody has any questions for Dr. Maylander, please put them in the Q&A, and we're happy to try and get to those. So I have several allergies and have an EpiPen. Can I still get the vaccine?
Yeah, so they have specific guidance recommended, and it depends on what your allergies are too. And so if you have allergies to injectable medications, we would recommend that you be monitored for 30 minutes. And so our normal time frame that we monitor is for 15 minutes. If you have an allergy or a significant reaction to any components of the mRNA vaccines, then that is a contraindication. And so the one that I kind of think of is polyethylene glycol. This is found in like a lot of your laxatives. And then also in and then also if you have a contraindication or an allergy to polysorbate, then those are components of the vaccines and that may not be the best option for you. So in that case, I would recommend waiting for these other vaccines to come to the market. So really not a ton of contraindications. CDC has released that if you have an immediate allergic reaction of any severity or like a serious alert or a serious reaction to the first dose of your mRNA series, then you not get that second dose. And so I would urge people that are kind of fall into that category to talk to a health professional to make that call. In some cases, you may be able to be seen by an allergist to really evaluate if it would be safe to get that second dose.
Awesome, thank you. What percentage of people need to get the vaccine? And it's a big thing that we have all heard around on the news, et cetera. But what percentage of people need to get the vaccine to make it meaningful as far as to change the spread of COVID-19?
I think that's a hard question to put an actual figure on. And the reason I say this is because herd immunity is really dictated by a couple of different things. And so it's dictated by the efficacy of your vaccine. So right now we have Pfizer and Moderna, they're very equally effective. That will change as we get more vaccines brought to the market. I'm not sure what the phase 3 trials for Janssen will show, what Oxford AstraZeneca will show. And then also the other piece of it is the contagiousness of the disease. And so as most people have heard, there is that mutation that has kind of arisen out of the UK that is more contagious. So if that is really taking a hold in Colorado and the US, that will make herd immunity and the number of people that need to be vaccinated much higher. And so I think another point that this kind of nuances is that right now, because the trials were meant to study symptomatic COVID, we really don't know how these vaccines at this point are affecting asymptomatic transmission. And so in my mind right now, what we can say is that if you're vaccinated, you protect yourself. Hopefully you're protecting other people, but we just don't know how vaccination is impacting transmission. And so I would just urge that we need a significant proportion of people to get vaccinated. And so others may throw a number out there, but CDC, WHO have not released a number that relates to herd immunity.
Okay, great, good to know. And so, again, if anybody has any questions for Kelsey, we have, about 5 minutes left. So please put those in the Q&A and we'll approach those for anybody that has any questions. What other information would you like attendees to know about the vaccine? If there's, those one or two things you're like, this is important that I think a lot of folks haven't thought about.
So I think related again to that asymptomatic transmission piece, until we can answer that, as people get vaccinated, it's important to continue social distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands. I received my second dose last week. My life really hasn't changed. I really need to continue to protect the people that I interact with on a daily basis. I need to protect the patients I care for. I need to protect my parents that I interact with still. And so I think that's a really important piece. Also, I think as a pharmacist, my job is always looking at the risk and benefit of whatever intervention, whatever medication, vaccination we're looking at. And so looking at the two vaccines that are on the market from what we see and what we have two very highly effective vaccines that have demonstrated a good safety profile in tens of thousands of people that were included in the trials. And then we have safety monitoring. We have systems to monitor the safety outside of clinical trials. And so we have not detected anything that would really raise that red alarm. And so I think that looking at that, we have safe and effective vaccines. Yes, we don't know the long-term safety data associated with this, but alternatively, we don't really know the long-term safety data associated with COVID infection. And so what we can see though is that COVID infection can present with these long hauler symptoms. And that's really concerning in my mind of like, what is the long lasting impact of COVID infection as we get further out from our initial cases? What we have seen is that we have people that continue to have shortness of breath, fatigue. I've even seen that they're questioning whether or not some people's taste and smell will ever come back. And so I think it's really interesting to see these long hauler symptoms. So even if you don't have that really acute illness, you end up in the ICU, it's going to significantly impact your life potentially. So I think that's really an interesting thing to consider. I also think that it's really hard to break down in your mind when you see these like very high case numbers. And so what I thought was striking was that it even like within the past week, if you look at our numbers and kind of do the math, some days we're having 3 people per minute die in the US as a result of COVID. I think that's a little bit easier to grasp. And so when I was looking at whether or not I decided to be vaccinated, it's really weighing the pros and cons, and then also considering the unknowns of vaccination and comparing that to what we're seeing in COVID infection.
Interesting. Wow, that number when you put it that way was like, oh, that's very eye-opening in that context of, 3 in 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. So, well, and then a couple questions from some folks here, Kels, that I wanted to pass along. Is it possible for or unadvised to get more than one type of vaccine?
So right now, the data that we have is that the products are not interchangeable. So that means that if you get Pfizer first, you should get that for your second dose. I know that there are some trials where they're mixing and matching. Again, the logistics of this is difficult. And so if we were able to remove that barrier, that would be helpful. Until we have that data, we need to go with how the trials were designed. And so we need to be giving Moderna, or Pfizer and Pfizer.
Good to know. Thank you. And then another question we have here, is there any medical reason why a person should not get the vaccine?
It's really related to allergy profile. So again, if you have an allergy to any of the components of the vaccine, it's contraindicated to get the vaccine. And the components are readily available. We can send that out if people are interested when we do the follow-up. And then again, if you have a serious or immediate allergic reaction after receiving your first dose, then you would not receive that second dose.
Great. Well, Kelsey, I just thank you very much for taking my call and offering to do this for the entire Nevada Chamber. And I'm glad when we saw the call out looking for a pharmacist, we were able to connect the dots and bring you on. I can say, and you know this firsthand of me, that I am not a science person, but you made that very easy to follow and understand. So thank you very much for your time and for being here. And can't wait to hopefully get this whole thing behind us. And you know the drill. Give you a big hug and go grab a drink again and hang out like we did way back when. So thank you for your time, and we will see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cami, back to you.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Kelsey. That was a lot of information, Kelsey, and you, as Colin said, put it in a wonderful way for us all to digest and understand. And I think that's one of the challenges all of us have been facing is we're getting this information in little bites, and it's hard to put it all together in a way to make it understandable. So thank you for helping us to do that. I know everybody that's listening today is better served now to be able to go out and make the right decision for themselves. So thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce and connect you to our next speaker. She has been helping the Arvada Chamber through this whole COVID-19 pandemic and keeping us informed, and we absolutely adore Christine Billings. Christine leads the Office of Pandemic Response and is the Emergency Preparedness and Response Coordinator for Jefferson County Public Health. She has been in that role for 8 years, and prior to that served Jefferson County for an additional 4 years as the Emergency Response Planner and epidemiologist. Welcome, Christine. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks, Cami.
Awesome. So we're going to do the same format that we just did with Kelsey. We're going to dig into talking about vaccines to start, and then we'll end with a public health update, because I know that there's a good amount happening with cases, and you always provide a great update related to that. So in keeping with this vaccination conversation, let's talk about the distribution in Jefferson County. What's the plan? Who's getting it? Who's had it? Where are we going?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are working, and when I say we, I mean the health and medical system within Jefferson County are working on a strategy that involves really that health and medical system. So we are signing up, we JCPH are signing up through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, our state health department, health and medical providers across the county who are able to administer vaccine. So these are healthcare providers who know their populations. They know the people that they serve. They understand their complex medical histories if they have them. As you heard earlier, knowing that medical profile is very important when it comes to administering vaccines, whether it's this COVID-19 vaccine or any other vaccine. Knowing the medical history is very critical to that strategy. So we are working hard to make sure that these folks are registered appropriately to administer vaccine. Different than what you may have seen during 2009 with our H1N1 pandemic. This vaccine has a lot of requirements from the federal government for these providers. They have to be registered with the state health department, and they have to be registered with the Centers for Disease Control. We can't just move vaccine from the health department to any provider that we would like. There's a lot of requirements related to who can administer the vaccine. That being said, we are up to 40 providers as of Tuesday morning across our community who are registered in the system and will be able to order vaccine hopefully in the coming week, literally next week, if not very soon, shortly after that. But while all of that registration is going on, we have 14 providers across our community who are already administering vaccine. Those providers include Safeway and King Soopers, our retail pharmacy partners. They also include us here at the health department, our federally qualified health center, which is Stride. They are administering vaccine. And then we have a couple of healthcare partners who are working on staffing individuals who staff our long-term care facilities or provide home health care to those who are not necessarily in a long-term care facility, but very much have care provided in their home. We have lots of home health providers that are registered to receive information from us at the health department on how they can be protected. And so we have a couple of healthcare providers that are administering vaccine to those staff members as well. The strategy in our current phase within Jefferson County, we are very close to what I would say almost fully saturated on phase 1A within our community, which are those super high risk healthcare workers, along with the residents and the staff of our long-term care facilities. By the end of January, we have been told that the federal partnership program for those facilities, which is through CVS and Walgreens, will have administered at least the first dose of vaccine to all of our registered skilled nursing and assisted living facilities in our community. We were able to get all of the facilities that are a skilled nursing or assisted living connected with that federal partnership. So we are in a really good spot when it comes to long-term care within our community. Again, it's taking a little bit longer than that program wanted, but by the end of January, we should have all of those residents and our loved ones within those facilities covered, along with their staff members. Jefferson County Public Health, as one of the initial registered providers of vaccine, has partnered with the City of Arvada Fire, and Arvada Police Department to stand up an administration site specifically for the healthcare workers in 1A, along with healthcare workers and first responders in phase 1B above the dotted line. The new phases that came out the first week in January from the Colorado governor and the state of Colorado divided up phase 1B in the graphic, literally with a dotted line on that graphic. So that is the commentary that we are using. It is 1B above the dotted line and 1B below the dotted line. And so we, as Jefferson County Public Health, in partnership with the city of Arvada, are working hard on 1A and 1B above the line, along with our first responders. This week alone, we were able to provide 1,167 doses of vaccine in 3 days to members of those two phases. That is pretty awesome. It is a really fun collaboration for us in public health who have planned for this for a really long time, thinking that we would never get to use our plans. This is really great to see all of the hard work coming together. That being said, we know that vaccine is not being allocated into our county at the rate at which it is needed and wanted. The demand and the urgency far outweighs the amount of vaccine that is coming into our community. So while we have all of these amazing providers that are in place ready to administer vaccine, we don't have the vaccine. We don't have enough to get to all of those providers. And so we have been meeting with our elected officials. We have been meeting with the state health department, putting in requests, putting in orders for what we can administer in hopes that eventually the vaccine will be able to come into our community in the quantities in which we need it. We are not able to make headway on 61,000 members of our population who are 70 and above, age 70 and above, until we get vaccine in quantities that are appropriate. That being said, starting next week, our retail pharmacy partners will be opening up their vaccine appointments to members of that population. It is super critical that our members, our elderly, understand that it's just gonna take a while. We just don't have the vaccine to get to everyone in 1 week. It will take a while, but we are starting next week. And for that, I am very grateful for our health and medical partners in our community that we are able to solidly say that next week we are jumping into that particular age group within our community.
So a couple follow-up questions for you, and there's an interesting one in the Q&A talking about, are veterinarians going to be trained to help with the distribution of the vaccine?
Yeah, we've heard, so this is the fun spot that I am in. Not all times, or I will say most times, does information make it from the state level down to the local level. And so last night, literally at about 4 o'clock, someone forwarded me an email that was sent to our veterinarians that they were included in a emergency authorization from the governor to be part of that vaccine distribution strategy. Which completely explains to me why I started to get lots of veterinarian partners signing up for our Health Alert Network to be vaccinated. So there will be more coming. I am hopeful. We have a meeting Tuesday as to how we are supposed to incorporate these additional partners who are licensed to give vaccines into our vaccination strategy across the community.
I love that. I feel like that's in the job description where they say other duties as assigned, like all of a sudden, a little bit of a role change there, but that's great. I love that we're activating all networks to make this happen. That's perfect. So for those that maybe didn't get a chance to see the state rollout plan, and I'm not going to ask you to name a date, but just kind of talk us through, like, for the average Joe that doesn't have any pre-existing conditions, when might we see kind of that full population getting vaccinated?
So this is going to be a really sad statement that I am about to make. Taking the amount of vaccine that we are currently receiving into our community, and trust me, we are working very hard, using those numbers and extrapolating out, we will not get to General Joe until phase 2 will start in August, and we will not get to phase 3 until Halloween of 2022. That being said, that is at our current vaccine levels. That is not at the vaccine levels that we have been told are coming. And so as we get more vaccine in, as we are starting to get additional vaccine and pharmaceutical companies online, that just increases the amount that is coming into our system. So don't cry with the 2022 comment. It will shift and it will change. I can confidently say we are almost through phase 1A. We are making headway on 1B above the dotted line. And my hope is that by April, we will be into 1B below the dotted line, if not phase 2, because I do have great confidence that Jefferson County will be getting more vaccine. We have some pretty collaborative elected officials that are helping to spread the word up into our community.
Awesome. So let's talk a little more about the logistics side of this. So I'm curious how people pre-register, how they get informed. We have a question in the chat about partners over 70. When can they pre-register? What's that process look like as your phase of the timeline comes up? How do you know it's your phase, and how do you go about getting ready to be in the loop on that?
Yeah, we've got a few strategies going. One, there is now a COVID-19 alert on the Jefferson County Civic Alerts. So you are able to sign up for that very specific COVID-19 alerts. And we will message on dial changes. We will message on changes in the vaccination phase. So that is a really great site to go to. Again, that is great for those of us that are very tech savvy, that have access to the internet. And so we have also stood up a community ambassador program within the health department, working with sort of community navigators per se, that we do a lot of public health work on a normal basis. And so we have trusted community members who are helping us to spread that information across the community. We are working hard to identify effective strategies for signing up members of our community who just have a simple landline. How do we get them into the system and registered? So I know that in our communication strategy from the health department, you're going to start to see lots of print media. We are going to do a television spot as well. And you will start to see lots of information coming out from our retail pharmacy partners who that community knows as a normal distributor of medications and pharmacy related things. More retail pharmacy partners are coming online. And I also know that our 2 hospital systems have sent letters, written mail letters, directly to the 70 plus members who have had interactions with their healthcare system. So for us in Jefferson County, that's SCL Health and Centura. So if any members of our population have a primary care doctor associated with those facilities, have had care in one of those facilities, they will be receiving an actual print letter that states how they can sign up with the hospital systems directly. I've also seen that Kaiser is starting to accept information and get folks onto a wait list. We here at Jefferson County Public Health, as we were that initial stopgap because we didn't have enough providers, we are not collecting a list here at the health department of folks to register to sign up. We are really targeting very specific populations through our collaboration with Arvada. And the state health department has begun to list how on their website, again, it's not an active thing, it's a passive thing, you have to go find it. But on their website, they updated it on Wednesday night to show all of the healthcare systems and how members of our community can sign up for vaccines through our healthcare system, the big hospital partners.
Awesome. So if you don't mind, after we're done talking, I would love for you to drop that link in the chat box of where people can sign up to get those notifications. I know there's some interest brewing in the chat that people would love to be able to do that. So
I will do that. I'll turn off my camera to do it though, because I
don't do it yet. I have more questions. Perfect.
Okay.
Awesome. So 2 more questions for you. The first is because we have a lot of employers on the line today, and I know there's a lot of questions around liabilities and can I mandate it and can people come back without the vaccine? And I'm not going to ask you to answer that question today. And I'm saying all this because we're working to get answers to those questions because we know that those are big questions. And so I don't want to leave that without saying that we're working on it and we'll have follow-up information as we find resources that support that discussion. But I do want to ask you, Christine, what should the employer's role be in this conversation? And as a follow-up, there's a question in there that in the Q&A that asks if businesses should be considering physical space where vaccines can be distributed. Is that something you guys are looking at, or is there an opportunity for employers there?
A couple of things. So one, I will just add to your EUA conversation. I know you're looking for more information on mandates. We have been told as a health department that we are not able to mandate the vaccine because it is operating under an emergency use authorization. As that relates to employers, I will leave that to you, to your research to find out. But I know that we as a health department cannot mandate a vaccine that's being issued under an emergency use authorization. As far as physical space, we are always happy to collect information from our partners. We get conversations and reach out from our healthcare system, folks that don't necessarily have a home, but they're licensed to give vaccine and want to stand up a bigger site. We are always happy to collect that information so that we can play that connection role between the people who are giving out the vaccine and our partners in the business community who have the space to do it. So we are always happy for that information. Some things to think about. We love outside spaces. We are still very much in a pandemic, so we like to have large outdoor spaces, and we always consider security. We have a lot of people coming in one place. There's still a lot of anxiety in our community. So safety and security of the space is also very important as well. And I think I missed the last question there, Tammy.
No, I think you got most of it. I'm just thinking about employer role, and I think that's a good continued conversation for us to be having of what should employers' role be in helping to make sure that we're supporting vaccines in this whole big picture conversation. I'm going to ask you to end with just a public health update, and maybe in there you can loop in. I know that the concern around the timeline of the vaccine may have created a little fear in people that we may be in lockdowns and restrictions till the end of 2022. So maybe we can address, and I understand it, you just maybe verify this, that we're expecting additional vaccines to come on the market and distribution to increase. So as that increases, then we will see that timeline go faster. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That
Okay.
is absolutely correct. This was based upon current allocations, and the point of that was that we could stress to our elected officials and the state health department that if our county does not get more vaccine, we are going to be in a very poor position. I know that next week we are already getting more vaccine into the community than we've ever had before. So the message that we are relaying is working, and that timeline will shift. You can quote me, you can come ping me when it doesn't, but it will shift, and it will not be Halloween of 2022. It will be sooner than that. There will be more vaccine. We have the capacity across our community. We just need the stuff. We need that vaccine to be able to get out. As far as a public health update, we are seeing a slight uptick in our cases coming out of the Christmas and New Year's holiday season, and when family members may have been gathering, and more mobility within our population. It is not the steep rise that we saw between October to November, so that is really great news. Our testing sites are they're not as busy as they were. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing yet, but there is capacity for testing. So if you have employees who are symptomatic, please make sure that you can get them out to the Jefferson County Fairgrounds to be tested. It's free right now. It's fast to get through the line because the response over there is so low, and we still have full capacity in testing. So definitely encouraging testing. We're still getting asked lots of questions about quarantine. So I'll just update really fast on that. The quarantine guidelines have changed, and hopefully everyone is aware of that. But if you have someone who is exposed to a positive case of COVID, they are to still quarantine, but they can go get a test on day 5 of that quarantine. If that test comes back negative and they are not symptomatic on day 7, then they are allowed to come back to work or be released from quarantine on day 8. So that's really great news for those of us in the community who need to work or who may not have the sick time to take off a full 14 days. This will really help, hopefully increase compliance with testing, as well as increase compliance with quarantine. In Jefferson County, our rates as of yesterday were 450.4 per 100,000. Again, that's above that 350 sweet spot that we'd like to be below. But the number has not increased dramatically from the beginning of January. This week that we're in right now is really the week where we're going to see a lot of the cases that would have occurred over the holidays come up in our testing numbers. So this is the week where we're crossing our fingers that we will be able to start to see either a really solid plateau or even a decline coming into next week. So we're on the rise, but it's not a steep climb for the lockdown comment and that I don't see that coming. I really do not. I think our community is very much aware of the impacts of that. I think they are doing a very good job of social distancing, wearing their masks, respecting the guidance that is provided. So while we are seeing an uptick, it's not dramatic, and it will not reach unless something very strange happens. It will not reach the levels that we saw right before Thanksgiving.
Awesome.
I also wanted to say that I have the vaccine numbers through the 13th, and we have already administered across the community 25,520 doses of vaccine across that system, that health and medical system, which means that 21,000 of our residents have received at least one dose of vaccine, and we have 4,000 of our residents, 4,410 to be exact, who are fully vaccinated, and that's a really great number. So we will see that increase and move forward, and that data will be available on the COVID alerts as it changes and shifts, and I will put that link in when we get done.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Christine. As always, you are amazing and you're a wealth of information, and we're grateful for your partnership through all of this. And actually ending on talking about where we are with cases is a really good transition to our next speaker. And we're going to take 5 minutes to talk 5-star with the fabulous Kat Douglas. Kat is the division director with Jefferson County. She leads the Business and Workforce Center, Community Development, Veterans Services, and Homeless Coordination teams. She has spent time in both the private and nonprofit sectors in the last 16 years with Jefferson County. She earned an undergraduate degree in international business from the University of Denver and her master's degree in public affairs from CU Denver. During the pandemic, she and her teams have supported the ongoing response and recovery efforts, the Small Business Grant Program, and led the Business Economic Task Force, as well as the 5-star certification program. So Kat has been busy for the past few months, and we're grateful that you were able to join us this morning. I know we don't have a ton of time left, and so we'll continue to circulate information, but I do want to take a few minutes to kind of update on what's going on with the 5-star program. And as I'm turning this over to you, I want to give a big thank you to Jefferson County. The pace and the investment in this program rollout has been incredible. And on behalf of the Arvada Chamber and the business community, we thank you for the commitment to that. So Kat, I'll let you give just kind of your quick update on the 5-star program and who's available to apply for it and what it means.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So the 5-star program, for those that don't know, is a program that essentially allows, once certified, a business to open at a greater capacity than what our level on the dial indicates. So currently we are at kind of an artificial orange level. We do need to get down to that 350 number that Christine spoke of. And once we do that for 7 continuous days, businesses that have been certified through this program can operate at the yellow level, which increases their capacity and their ability to serve more patrons. Right now, the business industries that we are certifying or pre-certifying include restaurants, both drive-through and non-drive-through. We started with non-drive-through. Those were the hardest hit in the recent closures that we had to go through in November. So we really wanted to target them and make sure we gave them an opportunity to open up at a greater level. We are now, as of yesterday, able to accept applications for restaurants that also have drive-throughs, as well as personal service businesses and gyms and fitness centers. So right now, all of those industries and businesses can go directly to our website. We will put that link in here at the end, and you can go in, read the instructions. I really, really encourage that. The instructions are lengthy. They're very detailed, but they're there for that reason, to make sure that businesses can successfully submit that application. Once that application is submitted, it goes to our vendor, who is Safe Built. Many people in the community are probably familiar with Safe Built, and they will review the application, make sure that it's complete. Essentially, the application is really detailing the plan that you have to adhere to those safety regulations that Colorado Department of Public Health has required with this program. And that's just to ensure employee safety, our patron safety, and all of those things while we're in this pandemic. Once those applications are reviewed and determined to be complete, the inspector will schedule an inspection. And it's a pretty simple process. We're hearing really great feedback from businesses who have gone through it, and really easy. And so that really just then allows them to be identified as pre-certified. Once we hit those measures that we spoke of being at that 350 or under number for 7 continuous days, we will then issue, once CDPHE gives us that approval that we can now authorize certified businesses to operate at the yellow level, we will very quickly send an email with that permit that that business can then post in their window, and they can start operating that minute at that greater capacity level. So there's a lot of benefits to it for the businesses that are able to apply.
Ooh, that was a lot of information, and you were very efficient about it. So thank you, Kat. And we will make sure that we get those links out and continue to. I know the Chamber has committed to being an ambassador to this program, so you will see updates coming from us as well as our Nevada Economic Development Association. So we're thrilled to keep you informed if it makes sense for your business. We recognize there's some pretty good value there. We are grateful for all of you joining us today. We know we just packed a lot in 1 hour of time, and so we will make sure that this recording is available to you and our other community members to make sure that we're continuing to distribute this information. We hope all of you can join us next month on the 3rd Friday for a discussion around mental health. We know that's an important topic in our community right now, and we're eager to have that conversation with all of you. Thank you so much. Happy New Year, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.